Hello, Assalamualaikum. We are from group number 4. My name is Muhammad Azif Fidaf bin Baharin and we would like to talk about Australia. So, let's go.
At first I didn't think that I was cutting off to bleed. Then I saw my secrets getting swallowed by the sea.
So, as we know, Australia is a famous country in the world because one, natural wonders and wide open space. Two, beaches, and the third is deserts. Okay, it is the Commonwealth of Australia, which is a country that consists of there are three. One is continent of Australia, two island of Tasmania, and the last one is has lots of small island. Australia also known as the sixth largest country in the world and the largest country in Oceania. So Australia also one of the highly urbanized country in the world. Alright. So let's find out the population of Australia. On 31st May 2020, the population at the Australia is about 25,768,871. Other than that, on 2020, Australia record about 25,499,884 population. So this amount make Australia rank in number 55 in list of countries by population. Other than that, the total area for the Australia is about 7,682,300 square kilometers. Next is map of Australia. This is the map of the Australia. We can see the national capital, just like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Perth. So let's take a look on cultural of Australia. If we live in Australia, we can see that there are lots of people that practice almost every religion and lifestyle. So there are three centers of multiculturalism that exist and popular in Australia. Okay, first is Sydney. Sydney is a hub of art, culture, and history that contains the Sydney Harbour Bridge, a world-class architectural gem. So next is Melbourne. Melbourne promotes itself as a center of arts, while Brisbane through various multicultural urban villages. Okay, other than that, Perth also popular because of their food and wine culture, Perth, gems and precious metal, and it also famous because of International Fringe Arts Festival. So there are 500,000 Australian people know the legend of Aboriginal, but they are lack to maintain it. The descendants of population are currently in small minority. Local colour and local language known in the English Australia, unfortunately, it almost lost because of influence and external admission. So, people still use lots of slang words that have been outdated. If you want to know, the conservative Australian accent is softer in tonal quality rather than rural area. So that's all.
My name is Juliana Rafika binti Jari, and now I will talk about employment and unemployment. The definition of employment is a relationship between two parties, which usually based on a contract where work is paid for. There are three main types of employment that are familiar. For the first one, we have full-time, which involves a specified number of work hours per week. In the second one, we have part-time, which comparable to full-time but with less work hour. And the third one, we have casual, which is much more flexible arrangement. Other than that, there are more specific type of employment. For example, we have fixed term, which may be full-time, part-time, and casual, but involve pre-specified start and end date. The second one, we have shift work, which involve changing work hours, for example, morning shift and night shift. And lastly, we have daily or weekly hire for a later project or once that company needs a temporary additional help. Employment contract exists in Australia have two main varieties. For the first one, we have open-ended, which form most common and involve an employee being hired of an unspecified amount of time. For the second one, we have fixed term, which rare but certainly worth being conscious of. They are generally specified as end date when employment will terminate. This graph shows the employment rate in Australia from June 2011 to March 2021. The latest rate for this employment in Australia is 62.8%. The definition of unemployment is a term relating to individuals who are employable and actively seeking employment and unable to seek out the job. In Australia, the Australian Bureau of Statistics or ABS are responsible for collecting labour market data. As a part of survey, the ABS groups those people from age 15 and above into three categories, which is employed, unemployed, and not within the labour hired. Once the quantity of individual in each of those categories has been estimated, they will calculate the labour force, which sum of employed and unemployed people. Second one, they will calculate the unemployment rate, which is the percentage of individuals that are unemployed. And the third one, they will calculate the participation rate, which is the percentage of individuals that working age population are within the labor force. There are three main types of unemployment in Australia. For the first one, we have cyclical unemployment, which occur with changes in economic activities over the trade cycle. The second one, we have structural unemployment, which occurs when there are mismatch between jobs that are available. And the last one, we have frictional unemployment, which occurs when people move between jobs within the labour's market. This graph shows the unemployment rate in Australia from June 2011 to June 2021. The latest rate of unemployment is 5.5%.
Okay, hi, my name is Nurasha binti Hashim. Moving on to the next section, which is inflation. So, we know that inflation is defined as a long-term increase in an economy's price level of goods and services. So, when general price level rises, this can result in loss of purchasing power per unit of money. So, inflation in Australia, as you can see from the graph above, consumer prices in 2020 on the first quarter rises to 0.3%. And as for 2019 on the fourth quarter, it rises to 0.7%. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, ABS, this beat market expectation of a 0.2% increases, although it marks the slowest rise. And the first quarter of 2020 decline was mostly due to the decrease of oil prices, which resulted in lower price for footwear, apparel, as well as transportation. And if we look from year-to-year inflation, from the fourth quarter of 2019, it rises from 1.8% to 2.2% in the first quarter of 2020. This exceeds the market expectation of a 2.0% inflation and marks the highest figure since the quarter of 2014. So while in terms of purchasing power, in Australia, $1 in 2019 be comparable around 1.01 in 2020. The dollar had an average annual of inflation rate of 0.87, and this indicates that prices in 2020 are 1.01 higher than average prices since 2019.
My name is Muhammad Rafiq bin Ahmad, and today I will explain more about fiscal policy. There are two types of fiscal policy, which are expansionary fiscal policy and contractionary fiscal policy. Expansionary fiscal policy is used to combat unemployment or recession because the economy suffer from increased unemployment, decreased income, and declining economic activity during a recession. The government will increase the public spending by undertaking public works program and reduce taxes. The effect of tax cuts would increase the amount of disposable income of individuals and business firms. And then contractionary policy. The contractionary fiscal policy is adopted to overcome inflationary problems. During inflation, the appropriate fiscal policy to create a budget surplus in order to reduce aggregate spending. The instruments used in contractionary fiscal policies are increasing of tax and the reduction of government spending. Okay, now I want to talk about fiscal policy in Australia. Australia's fiscal policy is guided by a medium framework that aims to maintain budget balance throughout the cycle. The government's balance sheet is kept in good shape thanks to the medium-term strategy. Fiscal policy is also used as demand management tool if fiscal strategy is developed with an over-the-cycle focus. And then the taxation in Australia is raised at the federal, state, and the local government stage. The federal government raised the revenues from a few taxes, which are personal income tax, business tax, general services tax, excise, and custom duties. These are the main source of income for Australian state governments. Since there are also taxation revenue, Australia is also said to have a few fiscal imbalance. Other than federal government tax, states and territories also have their own taxes too. For example, state taxes usually include payroll tax for businesses, poker machine taxes for gambling service, land tax, and stamp duty. Councils in Australia, also known as the local government, have their own tax to permit them to contribute services such as museum, libraries, park maintenance service, street cleaning, local road repairs, and many more. These councils also depends on state and federal federal funding to afford infrastructure and services such as roads, bridge, and sporting facility. Based on the Australian Bureau of Statistics (ABS), the unemployment rate decreased to 5.5% in April 2021, while the labour force participation rate decreased to 66.0%. The participation rate for 15 to 24 years old has decreased to 68.9%, and the unemployment rate for this group also decreased to 10.6%. In April 2021, the underemployment rate decreased to 7.8%, while the underutilization rate also decreased to 13.3%. An Australian market research company, Roy Morgan, also makes some research and state that unemployment rate in April 2019 was 8.9%. Meanwhile, Australian workers who were considered either unemployed or underemployed were predicted to be 17.7% in the same month. They also estimated around 4.219 million people are in the part-time employment. That is all about fiscal policy in Australia.
My name is Muhammad Isram Mustafa Abdullah. There are two types of monetary policy: expansionary monetary policy and contractionary monetary policy. The expansionary monetary policy is employed either to control employment or during recession. This policy is aimed at increasing the money supply in the economy. The instruments used in the expansionary monetary policy are buying government securities and bonds, decreasing reserve ratio, and decreasing discount rate. By doing so, customer spending increase, private sector lending increase, employment decrease, and overall economic growth. Development policy are also referred to as easy monetary policy. Contractionary monetary policy is employed to control inflation, and the economy needs to slow down by limiting the supply of money. This policy is adopted to decrease the money supply in economy. The instrument used in the contractionary monetary policy are selling government bonds, increasing reserve ratio, and increasing discount rate. The transmission of monetary policy. This transmission have two stages. First stage is about how changes to the cash rate influence other interest rate in the economy. The cash rate is the market interest rate for overnight loans between financial institutions, and it has a strong influence over other interest rate, such as deposit and lending rate for household and businesses, while the cash rate acts as a benchmark for interest rate in the Australia's economy. It is not the only determinant. Other factors, such as conditions in financial markets, changes in competition, and the risk associated with different types of loans can also impact interest rate. The split between the cash rate and other interest rate varies over time. Second stage of transmission of monetary policy in the Australia is about how changes to interest rates influence economic activity and inflation. To highlight this, we can use an example of how a reduction in interest rate affect aggregate demand and inflation. Firstly, demand. Lower interest rates in Australia increase aggregate demand by stimulating spending. Aggregate demand is initially greater than aggregate supply, putting upward pressure on price. Businesses increase their price more rapidly in response to higher demand. This leads to higher inflation. Some estimates suggest that it takes between 1 and 2 years for monetary policy to have its maximum effect. There is a large degree of uncertainty about the estimate because the structure of the economy in Australia changes over time, and economic conditions vary. Because of this, the effectiveness of monetary policy and the length of time it takes to affect the economy can also vary. Inflation expectation also matter for the transmission of monetary policy in Australia. For example, if workers expect inflation to increase, they might ask for larger wage increases to keep up with the changes in inflation. Higher wage growth would then contribute to higher inflation. By having an inflation target, the central bank in Australia can accord inflation expectation and seek to keep consumer price inflation in the economy 2 to 3% on average over the medium term. This should increase the confidence of households and businesses in making decisions about saving and investment because uncertainty about the economy in Australia is reduced.
Hi, my name is Nur Aisha Amalin binti Nur Azman, and I'm gonna explain about conclusion. As we know, Australia is famous in the world because of its natural wonders and wide open spaces, beaches, and deserts. Australia is also a highly developed country with the world's 12th largest economy. It has a high-income economy with the world's 10th highest per capita income, having the 8th highest human development index, and therefore the 9th highest ranked democracy globally as of 2020. Australia ranks highly in quality of life, health, education, economic freedom, and political rights, with all its major cities faring exceptionally in global comparative livability surveys. Besides that, Australia is also a beautiful country with great sceneries everywhere. Australia is also a growing country and changing both politically and economically. Until this day, Australia remains constant to continue developing and execute policies that will benefit both Australia and the rest of the world. That's all from our group. Thank you.